It started with the sound of her laughter through the wall, low, throaty, and entirely out of place in this quiet apartment complex where most noises were pipes, footsteps, or the occasional cat. I didn't see her that night, just heard it. But it stayed in my head longer than it should have. A week later, she walked into the repair shop where I work. I didn't recognize her at first, just noticed a woman with sun-browned skin, a neat bun, and eyes that looked like they'd seen enough to stop pretending. She was holding an old film camera. "Do you fix these?" she asked. Her voice was calm, careful, but not soft. I took it from her, turning it over in my hands. "Maybe. Depends what's wrong with it." She smiled faintly. "It won't click anymore. I think I pressed too hard." That kind of smile, half self-deprecating, half hiding something, made me feel stupid for looking too long. She wasn't young, but there was something sharper than beauty about her. She looked lived in, present in every sense. I tried not to show it. "All right, I'll take a look. Might take a few days." "Take your time," she said, as if time was something she had in abundance. She wrote her name on a slip, Elena. Her handwriting leaned slightly right, steady, deliberate. When she handed it to me, her fingers brushed mine. Just a second, but enough. My skin noticed before I did. The shop was small, oil-stained floor, smell of metal and coffee, fan ticking in the corner. Normally, I'd forget a customer 5 minutes after they left. But Elena, she lingered in the edges of my mind. The way her eyes didn't dart around like most people's. She looked directly, not with curiosity, but with quiet assessment, as though deciding if you were worth her time. The next morning, she was outside watering the small patch of plants near her doorway, the same building, 1 floor above mine. I hadn't realized until then that she was that neighbor, the one who laughed through the wall. "You live here too?" she asked, noticing me heading out with my toolbox. "Yeah, apartment 2B. She nodded. "Then I guess you've probably heard me talking to myself." I chuckled. Just the good parts. That earned another one of her half-smiles. "Good. I'll try to keep it interesting." She had a way of saying ordinary things like they were layered, a small tease hiding under politeness. I wanted to ask more, but she turned back to her plants, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, focused, graceful. I stood there too long before realizing it. A few evenings later, she came to pick up her camera. I'd managed to fix it. A tiny gear had slipped, easy repair. "Still works," I said, clicking the shutter for her. "She's old, but reliable." Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a heartbeat, I felt like I'd said something else entirely. "I'll take that as a compliment," she replied softly. I laughed, but it came out uneven. She did too, though hers sounded steadier, practiced maybe. Then she lifted the camera and aimed it at me. "Hold still," she said. The lens clicked. "Why me?" I asked. She lowered it slowly. "Because you looked like you didn't know what to do with your hands." I didn't. Still don't. When she left, the shop door chimed and shut behind her, but the air didn't settle. I found myself staring at the faint outline of her reflection on the glass. Her face half turned toward the streetlight, unreadable. That night, her laughter drifted again through the wall, softer this time, almost private. And for reasons I couldn't name, I turned off the light and just listened. I shouldn't have, but I did, and I still do. It was raining the next time she showed up. The kind of rain that doesn't fall so much as linger, soaking through everything without force, but steady enough to keep people inside. The shop was quiet, no customers, just the sound of droplets ticking against the window like a slow metronome. Elena stepped in, shaking the rain from her coat. "You left this in the bag," she said, holding up a small screwdriver, one of mine. I blinked. Guess I wasn't paying attention. She smiled faintly. "You don't seem the careless type." "Maybe not with tools," I said, and she gave this soft laugh, like she didn't mean to let it out. Then silence. She looked around the shop, her eyes tracing the cluttered shelves, the oil-stained rags, the calendar that hadn't been changed since August. She didn't look out of place, though, more like she'd been here before, long ago. I offered her a towel. She took it but didn't use it right away. Instead, she stood by the counter, turning the fabric in her hands as if thinking about something else. Her nails were short, clean. Her fingers looked strong, slightly rough, not the kind that belonged to someone who stayed still for long. You always open this early? She asked. Sometimes earlier. Depends if I can sleep. She nodded at that, like she understood too well. Yeah, she said softly. Some mornings come before you're ready. I wanted to ask what kept her up. Work, someone, or just thoughts that refused to quiet down. But something in her expression stopped me. There was a distance to her, like she was present and somewhere else at the same time. A truck passed outside, sending a splash against the glass. We both flinched a little. Then she started drying her hands, slow movements that felt deliberate, controlled. You take photos a lot? I asked, nodding toward her bag. Used to, she said. Stopped when it started to feel like work. Her tone was light, but her eyes weren't. So why fix the camera? She hesitated, eyes dropping to the counter. Maybe I just wanted to know if it still could. Something about the way she said it. Not the camera, not she, just it, stuck with me. I leaned against the bench, trying not to stare. I think it still can, I said quietly. That earned me a long look. The kind that holds a question neither of you are ready to answer. She blinked, looked away, and tucked the towel neatly beside the sink. You're kind, she said after a moment, almost like it embarrassed her to admit it. I try. Her hand brushed mine again when she set the screwdriver on the counter. Not deliberate, not an accident either. The rain slowed. The silence between us didn't. When she finally left, I watched her cross the street, coat drawn close, steps careful on the wet pavement. I told myself it was nothing, just neighborly concern. But when she turned slightly at the corner, eyes meeting mine through the glass for half a second, I forgot to breathe. And when the door chimed shut behind her, I realized my hand was still resting where hers had been. It was close to closing when she came in again, unannounced, like the weather. The air outside had turned heavy and strange, that charged stillness before a storm. Elena stood in the doorway, her hair damp, an envelope in hand. Sorry, she said. You weren't answering your bell. I had the music on, I lied. The shop was quiet as ever. She stepped inside, glancing at the clock. You're always here late. So are you, I said before thinking. It was an accusation, just observation, but she caught it. A faint smile. The kind people use to dodge honesty. I needed a screwdriver, she said, though she didn't sound like someone who came here for tools. I handed her one anyway. She turned it in her palm, testing the weight. You ever feel like fixing things is easier than not? Than leaving them broken? Her eyes flicked up, steady, knowing. Then admitting you broke them in the first place. I didn't have an answer for that. The thunder outside finally cracked. The power flickered once, then steadied. She didn't move. Her reflection shimmered in the shop window, fragmented between tools, wires, and rain. She looked younger there, almost uncertain. Do you want to wait till it passes? I asked. She hesitated. Would that be all right? Yeah, I said too quickly. I made coffee in the small pot behind the counter. She sat on the stool, watching the rain hit the glass. There was something intimate in the quiet, not in what we said, but what we didn't. When I handed her the mug, our fingers brushed again. Neither of us pulled back this time. Her voice softened. You remind me of someone I used to know. Should I take that as good or bad? She took a sip, avoiding my eyes. He listened too much. I'll try to talk more, I said. No, she whispered. Don't. That word, soft, final, stayed between us like a wire drawn too tight. I wanted to ask who he was, what had happened, why her voice suddenly trembled around the edges. But before I could, her phone lit up on the counter. A name flashed, Mark. She froze. The ringing went on too long. Then she turned it face down. Someone important? I asked quietly. Used to be. The storm deepened outside, wind pushing against the glass. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, staring at the floor. Her hair had loosened, a strand brushing her cheek. I wanted to reach out, tuck it behind her ear. The thought alone felt dangerous. She looked up then, and something in her eyes made my chest tighten, a kind of unguarded tiredness, like she was finally too weary to pretend. Do you ever wonder what people say about you? She asked suddenly. Sometimes, I said. Mostly I just hope they don't get it right. That made her laugh, short, fragile. Then she looked at me for a long moment, as if about to say something real. But instead she just set the screwdriver down carefully. I should go, she murmured. I nodded, though every part of me wanted her to stay. When she reached for the door, I moved to hold it open. Our shoulders brushed. She paused, close enough that I could smell rain and faint perfume, and something unnameable beneath it. Her hand lifted slightly, almost touching my arm, but stopped midway. "Good night," she said. And then she was gone. The door clicked shut. Outside, the storm finally broke. Inside, I stood still, realizing my heart hadn't slowed since the moment she'd walked in. For 3 days, she didn't come by. No camera, no raincoat, no footsteps on the stairwell above mine. Just silence, the kind that grows until you start hearing things that aren't there. By the fourth night, I gave up pretending I wasn't waiting. The clock in the shop read 8:43 when I locked up early and walked home. The hall smelled faintly of jasmine and dust. Her door, half open, spilled a thin line of light into the corridor. I hesitated before knocking. She answered almost immediately, like she'd been standing right there. "Hey," I said, softer than I meant to. "Your light was on." She blinked, surprised. "You noticed?" "I try not to," I admitted. That made her smile, barely. Then she opened the door wider. "Come in." Her apartment looked nothing like I'd imagined. Sparse, tidy, full of air and low hums. The fridge, the city through the window, the faint echo of a song cut off halfway through. On the table sat her camera, disassembled again. "Guess it didn't stay fixed," I said, trying for lightness. "Guess I didn't either," she murmured. That stopped me. I waited, but she didn't explain. Instead, she poured 2 glasses of something amber. "It's late," she said. "Might as well make it feel like evening." We sat opposite each other, her cross-legged on the couch, me hunched forward like I'd forgotten how to sit still. The city lights shifted across her face, turning her eyes from gold to gray to something unreadable. "You've been avoiding me," I said finally. "Maybe. Did I do something?" No, a pause. "That's the problem." I frowned. "I don't follow." She stared at the glass in her hand. "You're kind, patient. You look at people like they matter." She exhaled, shaking her head. "That's dangerous." "For who?" "For me." The words hung there, sharp and soft at once. I wanted to tell her it wasn't like that I didn't mean to blur lines, that I just saw her. But it sounded too simple, too clean for what this was. "Elena, don't," she said quickly. Then quieter. "You're too young to think this means something." Her tone wasn't cruel, but it carried a tremor, the kind you hear when someone's fighting their own voice. "I don't think." "You do," she interrupted. "That's the trouble." We sat in silence. Long enough for the ice in her glass to melt, long enough for my chest to start aching from everything I didn't say. Then she looked up, really looked. There was no armor left in her eyes, no deflection, just exhaustion, and maybe something close to confession. "I used to be good at leaving before things got complicated," she said. "Then you started waiting for me." I swallowed hard. "And now?" She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Now I don't know who I'm trying to protect anymore." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, necessary, the kind of quiet that knows too much. When I finally stood to leave, she didn't move. Her gaze followed me to the door, but her body stayed perfectly still, like she couldn't afford to. "Good night," I said. She didn't answer, just whispered, almost to herself. "I wish I'd met you at a time when it wouldn't have meant so much." It was a Sunday morning when she knocked on the shop door. Early, too early for anyone else to be awake. I hadn't even unlocked the front gate yet. She stood there in a gray sweater and jeans, hair loose for once. No makeup, no armor. She held a small envelope in one hand. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded and pushed the door open. She walked in without waiting for me to say anything else. The air felt off, not tense, just delicate. Like one wrong word could make the moment collapse. "I wanted to return this," she said, setting the envelope on the counter. It was the photo she'd taken of me weeks ago, the one with the awkward hands and uncertain smile. I turned it over. On the back, she'd written a single line in neat handwriting. "You look like someone who still believed people meant what they said." I didn't know what to do with that. "I shouldn't have taken it," she said. "It wasn't fair. It's just a photo. It never is." She said it quietly, but it hit harder than anything she'd said before. For a moment, I thought she was going to leave again, but she didn't. She walked around the counter instead, close enough that I could see the small scar near her collarbone, the faint tremor in her hand as she reached into her pocket. She pulled out a folded Polaroid, old, edges frayed. She handed it to me. It was her, younger, maybe my age now, standing beside a man with a camera slung over his shoulder. He was smiling at her like she was the only thing in the frame that mattered. He was the first person who saw me, she said, before I learned how to disappear. Your husband? She shook her head slowly. No, I didn't marry him. He died before we figured out if we were supposed to. I stared at the photo, unsure what to say. He used to take me to this shop near the pier, she continued. We'd spend hours fixing junk cameras, taking pictures of nothing. He said broken things had more truth in them. She smiled then, but it didn't last. When I met you, I thought maybe I'd imagined that kind of attention. The way he used to look at me, like I hadn't wasted my time trying to be small. Her voice cracked on the last word. I set the photo down carefully. Elena. She looked up at me. Tired, open, almost apologetic. You remind me of him, she said. Not because you're like him, but because you don't know yet how much it costs to care that way. The rain started again outside, faint, almost soundless. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I managed was, I don't want to be someone's ghost. Her eyes softened. You're not, she said. You're the part that wakes me up. And before I could find breath again, she turned away, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand like she hadn't meant to cry at all. When she left, the door stayed open a little too long, rain drifting in and pooling by my shoes. The photo of her and that man lay between us on the counter, her younger self frozen mid-laugh. But the line on the back of my picture, that one she couldn't take back, kept echoing long after she was gone. You look like someone who still believed people meant what they said. It was late afternoon when she arrived again, carrying the repaired camera. The sky outside was bruised with clouds, and the shop smelled faintly of oil, coffee, and rain. The usual mixture, but now it felt like home. She leaned against the counter, holding the camera loosely in her hands. I've been avoiding this, she said softly. Fixing it was never the problem, I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She looked up, meeting my eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I had to measure every word. The distance between us had narrowed slowly, imperceptibly, until it wasn't distance at all. I know, she whispered. We didn't move. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. The quiet stretched between us like the pause in a familiar song, comfortable, inevitable. I noticed the small tremor in her fingers as she set the camera on the counter, and without thinking, I reached over and brushed her hand with mine. Not bold, not sudden, just gentle. She didn't pull away. Her breath hitched slightly, the faintest sound, and I realized how much space she had been giving herself, and me, all these weeks. Now, it was gone, replaced by something simpler, acknowledgement. I've been trying not to care, she admitted, almost to herself. But I do. I nodded, because I felt the same, not in words, not in grand gestures, not in confessions. Just this shared presence, this understanding. The rain began again outside, a slow tapping against the windows, and she moved closer to the counter, letting her shoulder brush mine. A small collision, insignificant on its own, but electric in the way it lingered. I reached up, tentatively, and rested my forehead lightly against hers. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't planned. It was simply the next thing that felt natural. Her hand found mine again, this time deliberately, and our fingers interlaced, not tightly, not possessively, just enough to anchor the moment. We stayed like that, breathing quietly in sync, listening to the rain, listening to each other's presence. No words could capture what had built over weeks of stolen glances, shared silences, and lingering touches. I don't know what comes next, she murmured. Neither do I admitted. She smiled faintly, tilting her head toward me. Then let's just be here for now. I squeezed her hand once. That was enough. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, nothing else existed for those few minutes except the soft press of foreheads, the quiet hum of the shop, and the rain tracing the windows. No grand confessions. No promises. Just this. The inevitability of two people who had finally stopped resisting. And for the first time, the waiting didn't feel like anything but right. We didn't speak again for the rest of the afternoon. We didn't have to. Because some things, the ones that matter, don't need words. And in that quiet, I knew it was enough. I still remember that first night I heard her laughter through the wall, and I realize now how little I understood about what it meant to notice someone. Really notice them. Until her eyes found me. Months have passed since the stormy afternoons, the stolen glances in the shop, the quiet confessions that never needed words. I've changed in ways I didn't expect. I've learned patience, restraint, and how much a shared silence can say when hearts are too cautious to speak. Elena has changed too, though she won't admit it outright. Her walls aren't gone, but she doesn't carry them the same way. She laughs more freely now, lets herself linger, lets someone see her without the fear of being too much or not enough. She trusts again, carefully, deliberately, and sometimes that trust rests on me. Love, I've learned, isn't the sudden fire or the dramatic declaration. It's the accumulation of small moments. A hand brushed, a forehead leaned, a camera clicked, a storm shared. It's noticing someone even when they try to disappear and letting them notice you in return. It's quiet, imperfect, messy, and that's exactly why it matters. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about how it started, a laugh, a glance, a fragile photograph, and I'm still amazed that such small things could lead to this. Us, here, together, without pretense. The shop smells the same. Rain taps the windows in the same gentle rhythm, and sometimes, late at night, I hear her footsteps in the hall above. But now, instead of leaving me restless, it feels like a reminder that we've arrived at something real, something earned, something human. We don't need grand gestures anymore. We just exist in the same space, quietly, and it's enough. And as I sit here, watching her set the camera beside mine, I realize that what we found wasn't perfect love. It was something better, understanding, patience, and the courage to stay when leaving would have been easier. So if you've ever wondered whether noticing someone, really noticing them, can change everything, I tell you, yes, it can, even in ways you never expect. And maybe, just maybe, it's the small, unspoken moments that last the longest. Have you ever met someone who made you see the world differently, just by being there?